Welcome, it's indisputable. I'm your host, Rashad Richey, good to be with you. We got a lot of show today. Breaking down news of the day, my contributor will be Jordan Uhl, Rebel HQ contributor and host of Deep Dive, which is on Twitch. Yes, also in the bullpen, I have Mr. Chang Contreras, commentator Young Voices. We're gonna talk about this fascination that Tucker Carlson and others have with supporting Russia, and Russia now obviously supporting Tucker. Should be an interesting debate. Top story of the day. This is a story we reported on when it happened. A known KKK leader was seeking office in Georgia. And according to the locals, he was the favorite to win. I now have an update to that story, but to remind you of his interview and who he is, let's go to the interview.
When did you come out and renounce racism? Because I know you did that in the past.
2019, several times in 2020, but whatever banner I might have been fighting under, the enemy had always been the same, left-wing radicals, socialist.
But the Ku Klux Klan isn't against leftist radicals, they're against black people, Jews. What do you believe now that you didn't believe then?
Like I said, it just depends on who's looking at it. When I've ever read anything like that, it seemed like they were just pro-heritage.
The Ku Klux Klan?
But, well, in some forms, but I'm not here to defend them. It was 28 years ago, and I will not spend one more day I did this last year. No more apologies.
But when I was looking at social media, you had put this picture here saying that Jovi Val was coming to speak at one of your rallies here. And then this is him, Jovi Val, with a racist, and I mean, this is a Nazi hand gesture. And then he posted here, "Get in, we're hunting Juden." So he's talking about Jews. And that's him at your platform. Do you think that's someone who's a white supremacist?
You know, I wouldn't call him a white supremacist. I think Jovi's got some issues. I didn't know he was quite that extreme.
But that was posted before you invited him. When you invited him and said you were bringing him here, he had already posted those things.
Yeah, well, Jovi was involved a lot with the MAGA. I wasn't aware of any of his other street activism.
Street activism, you say? I call that regular ass racism. Yes, you all know each other and you all subscribe to the same ideology. Let's put up a picture of Mr. Chester Doyle's back in his heyday. That's him, okay? He was qualifying to run for public office in Georgia. In order to do so, it requires candidates to sign a declaration of candidacy and affidavit. That means a sworn statement. That piece of paper has been the focus of an ongoing CBS 46 News investigation that has now exposed 2 convicted felons who attempted to run for office in the state. 61-year-old Chester Doyles is a former leader of the Ku Klux Klans. He also spent time in federal prison for gun charges, and before that, beating a black man in Maryland. Good old KKK Chester filed his affidavit, all right? He filed his affidavit, it was March 8th, to qualify to run for Lumpkin County Board of Commissioners, District 3, state of Georgia. CBS 46 News received the signed document from the county when they confirmed that he did in fact qualify. But after CBS 46 started asking questions of local and state election officials, Doyles was disqualified. The Georgia Republican Party confirmed they started looking into it after the local news station brought it to their attention. So why was he disqualified? According to Georgia code written out on the declaration of candidacy and affidavit, felons can hold elected office in Georgia if they get their civil rights restored and if at least 10 years have passed from the time they completed their last prison sentence. It has been over 10 years since he was released from prison, but according to the Georgia Republican Party, his rights were not restored in time for the qualifying deadline. Now that poses a question because that means he lied, which was March 8th. In the beginning of the year, the first month, Doyles told CBS 46 investigator Rachel Polanski that they had but wouldn't provide any documentation. He said, hey, I have now been cleared. I have everything restored. That is what he said on the record. You were requesting a judge restore all your rights, including running for office. Has that happened? Rachel questioned Doles in February. That matter's been resolved. It's been cleared. I'm good to go, he responded. A month later, after he was disqualified, his answer changed. You had told me when we first talked that your rights had been restored by a judge. So that wasn't the case? Polanski asked. Well, I was asking, and it was not in the judge's authority. He said it's not that he doesn't want to do it, he just lacks the authority. So that was the start. And I've also filed with other departments, and I'm gonna leave it right there, he claimed. Now here's the other side of the coin here. He just admitted he knew his voting rights and his right to run had not been restored. He just admitted that in that interview. When he signed the affidavit, he proclaimed that everything in the statement he made was absolutely true based on his knowledge. He just admitted to lying in a sworn affidavit. Here's my question. I get it, he doesn't qualify, and he never should have qualified to run for elected office. But will the state of Georgia, through the Republican elected Secretary of State, his name is Raffensperger, will he now file charges against that former KKK leader? Because that KKK leader has broken the law, and he has admitted he knew he was breaking the damn law when he did it. He knew for sure there was absolutely nothing restored about his ability to participate as a candidate in the election. But he swore on an affidavit that it was. Now, while the Georgia Republican Party is getting some semblance of praise from people who say, way to go, Georgia Republican Party, for saying no to a known damn Klans member, I say it doesn't go far enough, because this man not only committed a crime in his affidavit, but if he has voted, he has also committed voter fraud. Now remember, right here on Indisputable, we just covered a story of a woman who was given clearance in writing that she was able to run for political office. Well, she got 6 years in prison. It has now been overturned, but she initially got 6 years in prison. A black woman, a Black Lives Matter activist, and the government gave her clearance that was in writing. The judge said she manipulated the government, manipulated the probation office into doing that. This man has nothing stating that he was allowed to do this. Where's his penalty? Jordan, thoughts?
Well, I think it's a good point. What is the party doing here? And I would discourage people from celebrating the Georgia Republicans from getting this guy out, but it seemed to be just on a technicality. It wasn't like they put out all the stops to block him because of his clearly hateful views. And I want to remind people, even though he said in the interview, oh, I've changed this and that, the enemy has always been radical leftists. That's still a core component of KKK ideology. It was beyond. I mean, obviously their first target was Black Americans, but beyond that, it was also Jews, just like so many other hate groups, and it was socialists and communists. And ultimately, their enemy is any sort of intersectional cooperative movement, because that would pose a threat to what they see as a potentially or perceived, marginalized white populace, which isn't true. It's rooted in hate.
That's right.
So it's good that he's out. He should have never been included or never been eligible or even close to this position in the first place. But also, I want people to think about why he saw the Republican Party as a vehicle for this candidacy. What about the Republican Party made him feel like that's how he should run, and that's the party in which he should run? And you could probably infer that based on their tepid response to him and hanging it up on a technicality, it's that they recognize that hate groups and hateful people in America are part of their voting base, and they don't want to turn these people off.
That's right, you make a great point, and let me highlight something that's part of qualifying as a county commissioner in the state of Georgia. In order to qualify as a county commissioner, that person must go through, they would like to run as a Democrat or Republican, they must go through the county party system. So the county Republican Party confirms individuals who would like to run on the Republican ticket. They also have the right to say no. And they can give any reason they choose as long as it's not because of a protected classification issue. They can just say, no, we do not support your candidacy. The Republican Party was not strong enough to do that. They decided to hang their hat on a technicality to try to get him out of contention. Okay, white woman. There's a white woman so full of damn hate that she sees a Black Lives Matter sign in somebody else's yard. She gets out of her car and she does this. Let's go to the picture. This person is full of hate. Look at her. That's called theft. That's called criminal trespass. This woman was so bold that she decided to basically pose for the camera at the residential property. This happened in North Carolina. A white woman is now subject to a criminal investigation after she stole a Black Lives Matter sign off another person's front porch. According to the local news affiliate, an unidentified woman trespassed on Melanie Larkey's property with the sole aim of removing the sign from her yard on Friday, March 11th, around 1:30 p.m. The ginger-haired woman got out of a black sedan and marched up to the grass and grabbed the sign. Before pulling up the sign, she waved at the camera. Then she retreated back to the car. The homeowner was in her house during the crime, but did not know anything was happening at the time. It was not until she reviewed her camera's footage that she became aware of the violation. Let's put up a picture of the homeowner. Her name is Melanie, okay? That's the homeowner. Melanie said when asked how she felt, she said surprised and unsettled are going to be the two words I'm going to use. It was really unnerving. Let me show you more pictures from the crime, okay? That is the front yard of a woman who cares about Black lives. That picture shows another woman who does not give a damn about Black lives. Miss Larkey recounted, she said her abrasiveness and walking into my yard and stealing something that did not belong to her. Then she even waved at the camera and then made some distasteful remarks. When she got back to the car she was in. The hate is unreal. So let's analyze this, all right? Let's be very clear. The person who grabbed that sign is a Trump supporter. I put my money on that. I don't know her political ideology based on some kind of voting history. I know it based on her behavior. That woman supports Donald Trump. There's a real connection there. Also, this is the same person, I guarantee you, who will say things like, we just want America to be free. Really? Isn't that something? You simply want people to have freedom. That's what this whole thing is about. Remember, they utilized that justification to do things like storm the US Capitol, impede the process of a constitutionally mandated dynamic, and also, even engage in criminality. But they say, well, this is all about choice in America. We want choice. Everyone will agree that going into a person's yard and stealing off of their property is wrong, it's illegal. Now, I gotta bring it out because what if the homeowner would have put some bullets in that body? What if the homeowner felt threatened? What if the homeowner came out and said, stop, and the person did not, and then they shot this woman? Do you think those on the right will say things like, well, you all have the right to bear arms, and in this case, we're glad that somebody was able to defend their property? Hell to the no. The reason is because they would have supported the woman who got shot in my make-believe scenario because they support stealing Black Lives Matter signs. There's more. The community of Starmount in South Charlotte, North Carolina, boasts approximately 2,800 people through its 2 zip codes. A predominantly Hispanic and white neighborhood, less than 7% of the people that live in the area identify as African American. That's according to citydata.com reports. Larkey believes the sign and conversations about race should not seem provocative. In fact, because of the lack of diversity within the area, it could serve as an educational tool. Larkey remarked, "I can't figure out what it is about my sign that says Black Lives Matter so upsetting to other people. It has shown me, and a lot of the other neighbors have mentioned it too, that we need a discussion about race. Race and racial discussions in this country should not be provocative. They should be out in the open. People should be able to have a conversation about it." All right, so the police are still investigating. But listen, we've covered things like this before with even more damaging impact. I want to remind you, put up the pictures. I want to remind you, over the last 2 years, activists, supporters, allies with Black Lives Matter signs, they have been targeted. They have been targeted for harassment, intimidation, and hate crimes. We reported on the Minnesota white man who harassed an interracial family back in July of 2021 over their yard sign and their very existence. He ended up ramming his SUV into the front of their home, running away, leaving behind a teddy bear hanging from a noose inside of the SUV. Put up a picture of that criminal. His name is Benton Byers. Leading up to this incident, Benton Byers had reportedly been stalking the family. They contacted the police. The police did absolutely nothing. After this happened, which was an attempted murder, he was never charged with attempted murder. Instead, that guy, Benton Byers, was charged with 11 criminal counts, including 2 counts of second-degree assault, 2 counts of stalking, and 1 count of first-degree property damage. But he had been terrorizing that family for months, and the cops did nothing until the family almost died. Now you have to understand how deep the hate runs for people who are simply driving down the street, supposedly minding their own business, and a yard sign that says BLM or Black Lives Matter will cause them to immediately engage in criminal conduct. They have been radicalized. They are domestic terrorists. That is what they are. Jordan, what are your thoughts here?
When I first saw this clip, I was appalled at just how entitled this woman was, just marching up onto the yard, taking the sign and waving to the camera. And I'm one of my guilty pleasures on YouTube is watching like people pranking porch package thieves. I don't know if you've seen these videos. And even in those, they're not even like as emboldened. They're just like, they're kind of sneak up, they run away. This lady just walked up, took the sign, waved and stormed off. And it really shocked me just how entitled she felt to take someone else's property, to walk onto their lawn, and what this ultimately says about her. And only to the privileged does equality feel like inequity. That is, this is somebody who is under a perceived attack, and those fears are stoked by right-wing media. And it underscores, the importance of shows like this, that you talk about these things and you bring these stories to the public, because you're not going to see these most other places. And at the same time, there's this right-wing effort to block these types of discussions in classrooms. Right. Racism and hate is a learned behavior. I like to think that it's not inherent in all people. And having these discussions in classrooms about this type of behavior, I think, is important, but the right wants to shut those down too. And that is because over time, politics in this country has shifted where the singling out, the targeting, the harassment, the ridicule of our perceived enemy is an effective political strategy. So that's why, in part, why the right is fueling these bogus hysterias like critical race theory.
That's right. Yeah, very well said. They are making fake policies and saying this is the new boogeyman. Okay, a man says, "I can't breathe." We now have the video. He dies because the police did not believe him. Here's the video.
You're bringing the fight to this, not us.
I'm not fighting it at all.
Then have a seat and provide your arm. This is your last opportunity. Otherwise, you're going face down on the mat, and we're going to keep on going.
Just give it a minute, okay? Please. We don't have no minute. Done, okay? I can't do it. I'll do it willingly, as told you. Please don't. Okay. I'll do it willingly. I'll do it willingly. I'll do it willingly. I promise. I'll do it willingly. Please. I'll do it willingly. I'll do it willingly. I promise you will. I'll do it willingly. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Just stop yelling.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't. Please help. I can't breathe. I'll do it willingly. I'll do it willingly.
Just relax and stop resisting.
Let me breathe. Let me breathe. Let me breathe. Please.
Stop moving.
I can't breathe.
The more you move, the worse it's gonna be, bro.
They're pushing right down. I can't breathe. I can't. You're pushing. Oh my God. Wait. No.
Edward.
Wake him up.
Hey, wake up. Hey. No. You got a syringe?
Sure you got a pulse on him.
Edward.
Hold his head, lift his head up. Give his airway open.
Edward.
They killed him. They killed him, and there was an attempt to cover that video up. But we have the video now. Let's put up a picture of Mr. Edward Bronstein. He should be alive today. That's Edward with his daughter, Isabella. His death happened about 2 months before George Floyd's murder at the hands of Derek Chauvin and other cops. Bronstein's family is now suing over the 2020 death. They have called for charges against these officers, and I joined them in this. Now, I know some will comment on this when we put it on social media and say things like, well, Doc, he's not black. And he should be alive. He's dead. He's a human being. My dear brother, Ben Jealous, was on my show not too long ago, and we discussed two dynamics. We discussed what's called the racial bias index of police officers and the aggression index of police officers. And he has some interesting research that he cites, and he talks about how if a cop has a low racial bias index, but a high aggression index, situations like that will still happen. There's still a problem in the culture. When you have a cop that has a high racial bias index and a high aggression index, you have disaster happening damn near every day. It is still part of the culture that we must eradicate in this country. Let me give you some background to this story. Here are the details. Edward Bronstein was 38 years of age. He died March 31st, 2020, after the California Highway Patrol sought to take a blood sample following a traffic stop for allegedly driving under the influence, according to lawyers of the family and court documents. The family has now filed a wrongful death lawsuit in December 2020, but they also want LA County DA to file criminal charges against the officers. The wrongful death lawsuit alleges officers used excessive force and did not pursue medical care in a timely fashion. I agree, they did not. The family attorney, Michael Carrillo, said, and I quote, not one officer took the action to pull the others off of him, pull him to the side, or something to give him air. When they finally flip him over, he's lifeless. Now, let's go to the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner. The LA County Medical Examiner's office, they ruled Bronstein's cause of death as acute methamphetamine intoxication. during a restraint by law enforcement. What in the hell kind of conclusion is that? Is it homicide or not? And the matter is unknown. You're the damn medical examiner. This is unknown to you? According to online records and court documents filed by the state opposing the release of the video at this time, they were still opposing the release of the video. It is an obvious attempted cover-up. Let's put up a picture of the LA County DA. A spokesperson from the DA's office said that the matter still remains under review. CHP Commissioner Amanda Ray, let's put up a picture of Commissioner Ray, California Highway Patrol, all right? They have declined to comment. Lawyers representing the California Highway Patrol and the officers in court filings have denied any unconstitutional or other types of wrong conduct and said they were performing their official duties impartially and fairly. Where is the common damn humanity? If somebody says I can't breathe, damn, believe them. If somebody says I can't breathe, breathing is important. Why is it? You have to ask this question. All of these cops, not one person tapped somebody on the shoulder and said, hey, back up a little bit, give him a little room. And here's the other side of this. It only takes one person who actually values humanity to change that whole situation. If one cop would have said, hey guys, let's back up for a minute. And that empowers you. Every single one of you that will see this segment, you are empowered in ways just like that. It only takes one person. If one cop would have said, just back away from him, he would be alive. He would be with his daughter, Isabella. He would not be a dead man today, and I would not be doing this segment about him. Jordan, what are your thoughts on this case?
I think you're exactly right. This reflects a collective disregard for humanity. If somebody just recognized his pleas and intervened, he would be alive. And this isn't the first time, sadly, that we've seen incidents like this. George Floyd and Eric Garner, like these are the same sorts of incidents where the cops just refused to stop restricting airflow. It's sadistic and it's cruel. And part of it's the training. It's this really hyper aggressive police training that they receive where everybody's an enemy, death is lurking around every corner. And just a fundamental disregard for a core component of what like community policing should be is just to protect and serve. That's never been the case. This is the system working as it's really designed. And when you continue funding them, especially the more militaristic aspects, this is the result you're going to get. But while people might try to split hairs over semantics and was he resisting? Was he being aggressive? Look, the fact of the matter is, no matter what you're accused of, the punishment is never being killed on the spot by police, period, ever. That should never happen. But sadly it does, time and time and time again, and people will find new excuses to make to justify these unjust deaths.
Yeah, you have the right to due process in this country. Cops should try it. We got more on the other side. It's indisputable, stick and stay. The concept of the Young Turks means the audience, they are the Young Turks. They are the go-getters. They are the ones making the emphatic change happen in their local community. The reality is that we've always, young and the not so young, we've always cared about news. But when you do not see the messengers of the news look like you, when they do not share your experiences, exposures, and environment, and there's a disconnect between you and the news. I lecture in mass communications. One thing I tell all of my students, there is no such thing as non-biased news. It never has been. Non-biased news has always been an illusion. Let's go back to the 60s and 70s, where people would say that was the purity of non-biased news. News has a segment. That segment has a time. That time, you must do your story and be finished. That means the producer, the writer, the orator has to take out what they don't think is important and only leave in what they believe is important. They have a limited time to tell the story. They do not have time to tell everybody's version or everybody's side. And they get to choose the facts that they bring to you, as well as the nuance, which really is a word for opinion, that they bring to you, the context they bring to you. So we've always had a level of bias in news. Here's the issue. The issue is to not deceive individuals as if you don't have some level of opinion with your news commentary. And that's what TYT has never done. They've always been authentic in their approach to progressive ideology and their news analysis and political breakdown. And I think that's how you actually win the heart and soul of individuals who are consuming information from you, because now they see themselves in you.
This is where it all began for many elected progressive leaders. The Young Turks was one of the few media outlets to cover the races of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and many, many more. We know a great majority of the country is actually progressive, and TYT is here to amplify these issues so that we can have better policies that a majority of the country actually supports. We want to drive positive change, and then we've been doing that for 20 years here. That's why we're launching Canvas 2022, a campaign to get out the vote and amplify progressive candidates, the progressive agenda, and their primary races. The midterm elections are fast approaching, and we know mainstream media won't cover progressive voices, but because the TYT audience is too strong, we can make a difference in the midterm elections to help progressives get elected and make sure our priorities are heard. Support our mission to drive positive change. Visit tyt.com/canvas2022.
You don't see a lot of news coverage in the mainstream media of the peaceful Black Lives Matter protests that happened throughout the country.
Black Americans are hurting. Minorities in this country are hurting.
We always talk about starting from the bottom up, but the problem is the bottom up is always the least amount of power. No one cares about them, and until someone actually cares about them, then we'll do something about it.
Please, for God's sake, America, understand, acknowledge, and work towards getting to a new reality where Black lives actually matter.
Welcome back, it's indisputable. Okay, let me read some of these amazing comments. Thank you all for joining the program by way of your great commentary. Let us not forget the watch list with the big homie, Jared Jackson. Yes, there it is. All right, that's every day, every weekday. tyt.com/watchlist TYT. Follow, subscribe, support the show. Live 12 p.m. Eastern time, weekdays, 12 p.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Find out what stories you need to pay attention to in news, politics, culture, current events, sports, and more. All right, we got the Shorty Awards. Voting has begun. We need to go ahead and just do what we do. So go ahead and vote. Make sure TYT wins in the Shorty Awards, and this year we're up for 2 categories. Support TYT in news and media and help shop TYT win retail and e-commerce. Go to tyt.com/award to vote. You can vote every day until Friday, March 18th, all right? Membership, resistance against the establishment is a constant battle. We need everyone to help and become part of TYT's progressive change. That means you. Help facilitate positive change in the world by becoming a member at tyt.com/change. Let me read a couple of comments. Mickey C, the Silver Hat Dragon says, isn't it amazing how right-wingers never realize that they're associating with white supremacists? Invite someone to speak at your event, speak at an event, and they never vetted that person who they're supporting. Believe that? Sure we do, honest, truly, yeah. Trudy Lawrence says, oh yes, Mr. KKK, you got caught. Now pick up face and find another lie to tell. K. Ron, hey, thank you. Okay, thank you, Dr. Rich, for all you do. Thank you as well. Bernie the Kiwi Dragon. Side note, none of these cops know first aid or CPR. The only reason they didn't have these life-saving skills at hand, I think, skills to hand I can think of is because saving lives is not at the forefront of their minds. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish a Karen would.
You want to call the police on them for having a barbecue on a Sunday.
You're still free! Back off! I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life. $2,000 for flight! It'd be great if you put it on the plane. I paid $2,000 to be on. We can this whole airport up. I don't give a about a single person in here. I gave your airline $2,000 to be sitting on that flight right now. And because I have 2 bags, and American Airlines says you can have that stupid out there, Julie. I see out here. Hey, if I spent $2,000 round trip from Longview to Medford back to Longview, why the am I not on a flight back to Longview? Quigley, Q-U-I-G-L-E-Y. Put me on a flight.
I think this Karen paid $2,000 for his plane ticket. Okay, classic Karenicity here. Obviously, he does not belong on an airplane with that kind of attitude if he is already acting in such a way. But it took a while for the police to come. Here it is.
He is now surrounded by a third policeman in the back.
I never have that much fun when I go to the airport. I'm talking about recording something like that. I promise you, if that ever happens to me and I have an active Karen in front of me, I will live stream for the sake of everybody who watches Indisputable. Okay, this individual continued his insanity. He was, actually, they were very patient with him in the beginning until they were not. Jordan, thoughts?
I mean, look, I get flying can be stressful, but it's never justified to yell at a staffer. You think the person behind the desk is the reason you're not on the plane. I'm sure we're missing some other details, but just like at first point, just never yell at a customer service person or service worker. That's just never a good idea. But I also want to point out, we just watched that clip and we were talking during the break how heavy it was. Like, this is an alternative to putting your knee on someone's neck. He was clearly resisting, he was belligerent, and they found a non-lethal way to subdue him. There are alternatives beyond killing people, and I wish more police departments would recognize that. So it was, funny to laugh at and watch, but like, look, this underscores a larger problem. They know these methods exist, but they go first for lethal maneuvers.
And yes, I agree with you 100%. And let me go back to the male Karen, because I really need Karens to implement some level of critical thinking. You have already paid $2,000. Likely your flight will get rescheduled, or maybe you get a refund. If you go to jail, you have now likely lost that opportunity at a refund and a rescheduled flight, and you now have to pay a bond and possibly a fine. You are now in a worse position than when they first told you you cannot get on the flight. I don't understand why you would engage in activity that literally makes you pay more than the $2,000 you are complaining about. Okay, you know, Pat Robertson, what can I say? Let's just go to the video.
We have the firepower to wipe out every Russian city, just one Trident submarine. And of course, we're not using it and have no intention of using it. But why doesn't somebody in the administration call Putin's bluff? He's bluffing. And every time he says, well, if you do that, we're going to escalate. Oh, no, you're not, old buddy. We're going to do you if you try to do us, and we'll make it worse, and you know it. Putin knows we're powerful. He doesn't have much of an army. He doesn't have much of an economy. It's a tiny economy, and he's playing a bluff. But unfortunately, we have a man in charge in Washington who doesn't like to stand up to bluffs. He folds his winning hand every single time.
White Jesus is a hell of a drug. How in the hell is Pat Robertson still alive? Okay, let's go ahead and do it. Pat Robertson, who, by the way, was a hardcore Trump supporter. I mean, this guy bent all kinds of rules on his TV station, on his TV network in order to support Donald Trump and all of his insanity. Now he wants the American government to engage in a nuclear fight with Russia. Now, why is he saying this? Maybe because he's closer out the door than in it. But I want American lives to remain intact. Because if we go to war, that means there's a calculation in America of soldiers who will die, young soldiers who will be killed. They will give their lives in that scenario. Well, obviously, Pat Robertson does not care. He previously tipped his hand back in February when he was all giddy about possibly going to war with Russia. Here it is.
I think you can say, well, Putin's out of his mind. Yes, maybe so. But at the same time, he's being compelled by God. He went into the Ukraine, but that wasn't his goal. His goal was to move against Israel ultimately. God is getting ready to do something amazing, and that will be fulfilled. And what Putin is doing by moving as he is to set up Ukraine as a staging ground for one of the armies, and then across is Erdogan at Turkey, and you've got between them that little Dardanelles area, and it's going to happen. So I just say that is what's coming up. Is Putin crazy? Is he mad? Well, perhaps. But God says, I'm going to put hooks in your jaws and I'm going to draw you into this battle, whether you like it or not. And he's being compelled, after the move into the Ukraine, he's being compelled to move again to get a land bridge and then across the Dardanelles with Turkey, and watch what's going to happen next. You read your Bible because it's coming to pass.
Pat, I'm a Christian man myself. God gave me a brain before he gave me a book. You need to sit your ass down. You literally have a Christian pastor who people actually listen to, continuing to call for warfare. This is not the first time. He has called for the assassination of other leaders. He has called for warfare in other conflict. He has been wrong on his prophecy many times. He simply gets a pass because, let's face it, religion is the best hustle in this country. Jordan, thoughts?
Look, this will come as no surprise to anyone, but Pat Robertson has no idea what he's talking about. And it's important to remember that any increased escalation with Putin and Russia and the Russian military will be fought mostly in Ukraine. We will not be affected. We'll send people there, but the battles, the bombs, the cluster munitions, the things that are wreaking havoc on people's lives will not be here. And it's very easy for a right-wing, Christo-fascist leader to suggest that we should do this So we should escalate tensions with a nuclear power. We should wage war with them because they're completely insulated from the consequences. It's very easy for people in privileged positions to call for these horrific acts of human violence and atrocity when they know they won't face any blowback. So this is, we see this throughout the right, but it's extremely troubling as these calls for war continue to grow.
Yep, we got more on the other side. It's indisputable. Stick and stay.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks.
Ooh.
Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like tyt.com/join, and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitsing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, aka Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
And this is the Pittsburgh office, by the way, referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool, rebel?
And I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing.
Oh, that was disastrous.
This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richard. We got a lot happening today. But what do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable.
Rashad, great to be here. Congratulations on the new show. And I gotta let everybody know that Rashad and I go way back.
Here's the pattern that we see in all of these Karen stories. They think they own stuff they do not own. Now, where does that come from? I don't know, maybe slavery. Maybe they think they should still own black people.
This is what happens when Karens weaponize the police.
When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression.
It hits you in a certain way when someone is holding you against your will, treating you like you're a criminal and you're an innocent person. This is something that black people face no matter where they are.
A stronger black economy lends itself to a stronger, greater economy. Don't think it's exclusive of you, it's inclusive of you.
What's your beef with critical race theory?
It adds more fuel to the fire of the racist tendencies that we already have.
We have a generation of problem solvers that can remedy the problem if they are properly taught what the problem is.
You know who created redlining in this country? It was a white liberal.
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy, Shelley, here's what I don't know. I don't know. See, there you go filibustering, brother. You're scared of this truth, but you're gonna get it, though.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader.
Welcome back. We got a lot of show left. Let me read some of these comments. I only have time for a couple. Let's go to C3339409. Karen down, Karen in distress. I repeat, Karen in distress. Yep. Gasell, now you paid $2,000 just to get a cot in a jail. Yeah, that's basically the summary of it. Okay, surrender to the flow. This guy started screaming and my dog just got up and backed out of the room. $2,000. Okay. Very disturbing. A police officer has now claimed that not only is there racism in his police department, but also they were talking about starting a race war. I kid you not. A cop has now sued over racist text messages with coworkers. In a series of text messages, a white supervisor and other police officers in Montgomery County talked about preparing for a race war and expressing they hoped that Black Lives Matter protesters would actually be killed. That's according to a federal lawsuit filed by a Black colleague. Let me give you details about this tragedy. Mark Miles of Maryland National Capital Park Police is filing a lawsuit against officers who sent him racist and abusive messages, reported the Daily Record. The suit claims the officers spoke in a group chat about triggering a race war with mentions toward far-right extremist groups. Miles joined the police division back in April 2020, becoming the only Black officer on his shift. The lawsuit said those involved were other officers on his shift and a supervisor who often made his race a subject of conversation. Now, here's why it's important to understand the dynamic of this being a shift thing, okay? Remember, culture matters. Culture matters. That shift is all white. That shift is a white culture shift. That working group gets one Black person in it, and what happens? Well, he's in receipt of racist text messages. There's a reason why. The complaint alleges that Miles' supervisor in Shift 5, Sergeant Stephanie Harvey, told Miles that other officers in the squad, they were worried, they just couldn't trust him because of his race. Harvey told Miles that she'd informed the officers that he was actually half white and half Black. You're just half Negro to us. We'll tell them the other side is white. That'll do it. As soon as he was added to the group, Harvey allegedly sent a photo of a Black child that said, well, hello, MFers. On another occasion, Harvey texted the group, they want a race war? Okay, let's go. Miles, you're on our side. At least half of you is. And you know they did that white laugh at the end, like obviously this should just be funny. Let's joke about killing Black people. We already want to say the man is half white just to allow him entry into our white-only police club. It gets deeper. Harvey did not stop there. This police supervisor, according to the complaint, also proudly proclaimed herself as a racist. You don't say. Misogynistic and homophobic. Then she went further to suggest it was time to start killing Black Lives Matter protesters to kick off a civil war. Another officer responded back, Boogaloo is coming, referring to a far-right extremist movement. Per the shift, Harvey was also alleged to be dismissive of racial bias training and claimed racism was just all made up. Once Miles reported these messages to another supervisor outside of that shift, what happened? They retaliated instead of looking into the issue. Miles was removed from the group chat, excluded from work events, and even when he called for backup at a high-risk stop, no one showed up. You really think this is about policing? The lawsuit calls for Harvey to be fired and for the department to monitor employment complaints of misconduct to make sure no one has to go through what Miles did. Miles is also seeking compensation for the physical and emotional distress, humiliation, and embarrassment he endured, reported WTOP News. Let me show you a picture of the division chief. Yeah, didn't expect that, did you? That's the division chief. His name is Stanley Johnson. He oversees that department. What has Stanley done? Not a damn thing. Why hasn't he? Maybe he's afraid. Maybe Stanley is just as much of a coward as the cops under him. Maybe Stanley, instead of trying to fight evil and fight white supremacy and fight these insane assaults against citizens, maybe he just wants to figure out how he fits in. Put up his picture again. I'm so damn disappointed in this black man. Yeah, he's the problem too. Stanley is the problem too. Instead of standing up and making the community proud he comes from, he decides to simply manage the dysfunction under him. Keep it out of the headlines. Jordan, thoughts?
So, Doc, you mentioned this was in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I want people to understand the demographics of that country, that county. That county in Maryland is just north of DC and home to 3 of the top 10 most diverse cities in the country. It is a robustly diverse county, and look, it is a problem when there are racist officers anywhere. Period. What's even more alarming is when you have them in a very diverse area. Like, they're not going to be able, it's much harder for them to act out on their racist, violent fantasies in a mostly white rural part of the country, thankfully. But in Montgomery County, that's extremely dangerous because of how diverse it is. So I worry about the people who live there, that is the people who are purportedly keeping them safe. And again, it is an issue when there are racist officers anywhere, and there is a huge problem with that has totally gone unaddressed. Part of that is because of how police unions function and how they retaliate against anybody who even tries to speak up. Yep. It has led to very tragic outcomes, like with Dorner in California, who tried to raise internal concerns about racism in his own department, and that they harassed and belittled and ostracized him, and that ended up in a very tragic outcome. But when going up the chain of command, whether in the military or the police, so rarely works that we have to have a different sort of system, and part of that is taking on the police unions.
Yeah, and you got to think about how systemic and how ingrained racism was in the culture of this police department. Before the officer was allowed to work on that shift, they already had a plan to soften who he was, because they obviously have a thing against black people. And it's so sad, and I got words for him too. It's so sad that he decided to play along with that madness, because that doesn't help anybody win. That doesn't help the community he's from win. That doesn't help the citizens that are under the authority of that insane leadership of their police department win. And it doesn't help the racist person win either, because left unchecked, that continues to permeate our culture, and they do not have an opportunity for reflection. Racism exists on a spectrum. There are some people who are racist who can be saved. There are some who cannot. But they never get that opportunity if we continue to coexist in spaces where we are afraid to challenge them, afraid to speak up, trying to simply fit into their master plan rather than disrupt it. What are your thoughts on that, Jordan?
Absolutely, it's extremely troubling. I feel bad for this guy who seemed like he had altruistic purposes and motives for even joining, and this is what he dealt with. I mean, police unions, how they look out for one another, how they cover for one another, how they have multiple days to get their story straight when there's reports of wrongdoing. It's a system that has to be changed. That they shouldn't be able to investigate themselves and then say, "Oh, we did nothing wrong." Surprise.
Yeah, well said. That concludes our live linear. For those who are continuing to watch us via streaming, we got more stories, let me highlight this one, okay? All right. That's a Democrat. That Democrat engaged in implicit racism. That Democrat, her name is Barbara Goldberg-Goldman, a Maryland Democratic Party deputy treasurer. She has been forced to resign after sending an email to party officials, a public email to party officials, questioning if black candidates can actually win in their state. Now, it's so interesting because anytime a black person loses a statewide race, all of a sudden, well, maybe people just don't want to elect a black person. Blackness becomes the reason. But white people can lose. As a matter of fact, white people have lost more elections than black people. But their whiteness is never part of the reason why they lost. Their DNA, their skin color is never contextualized in the scenario during the post-analysis of what happened during the campaign. But when a black person loses a political election, all of a sudden the conversation goes to race. I'm gonna prove it to you. The email was sent to party members by now former Democratic Party Deputy Treasurer Barbara Goldberg-Goldman. It was obtained by Axios. In the email, Goldman said, and I quote, "So my thinking beyond here is the age-old question, which candidates have a better chance in the general election of beating an attractive female Hogan team member for whom both Dems and Repubs have expressed genuine likability?" Goldman wrote, "Consider this, 3 African-American males have run statewide for governor and have lost. Maryland is not a blue state, it's a purple one. This is a fact we must not ignore. In the last 20 years, only 8 have been with the Democratic governor. We need a winning team." You see, madam, you're supposed to represent change, transformation. You're supposed to represent transformative politics and not transactional. You're supposed to be on the right side of the conversation. You're talking just like Republicans. You're talking just like conservatives. You're talking just like racist people. Consider that. Here's a little tidbit on how the voter demographics actually break down in Maryland. According to the Baltimore Sun, registered Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1 in Maryland. Maryland's black population is damn near 30%. That's the highest percentage outside of the Deep South. Maryland's past 2 Democratic nominees for governor have been black, meaning they beat all the white people in the primary. And yet the state can't seem to elect a black governor, and because the last 3 black candidates lost, it's automatically assumed that their blackness has something to do with it. Goldman may have been the one who said it, but anyone would be naive to think she was the only one thinking it, or that this conversation has not happened countless times in discussions on political strategy in other states, in particular with Democrats as well. Imagine how many times the same discussion was brought up in consideration of Obama's presidential candidacy. One of our dear friends of the program, Ben Jealous. Remember Ben Jealous? Good friend of mine too. Black gubernatorial candidate Ben Jealous had words for the Democratic Party and his betrayal of black supporters. "White men lose races all the time," Ben said, "but no one ever ascribes that loss to their DNA. Black women and black men are entreated to support the Democrats every single cycle. We are told that Democrats are the party that stands for us. And then when we stand up to lead, we're told that our race is an obstacle to us winning." This kind of backwards thinking has no place in the future of the Democratic Party in Maryland, nor is it acceptable coming from a party official. John B. King Jr., a former US Education Secretary, said in a statement calling for Goldman's resignation. As someone whose family went from being enslaved in a cabin in Gaithersburg to serving in the cabinet of the first black president in just 3 generations, my family story is a testimony to the progress that black Americans can achieve. Deputy Treasurer Goldman must resign from her position with the state party. All right, cool. Now watch this typical half-ass apology she decided to pen. Goldman said, "I am well aware that words matter despite how they might be interpreted. And I sincerely apologize. I would never want to distract from the hard work and mission my colleagues and friends fighting for the principles upon which the Democratic Party and I stand for. No, you don't stand for them, madam. So she didn't even apologize to the present and future black candidates she just dismissed, or to black people in general. She apologized for being a distraction to politics as usual. Offended party be damned. Jordan, thoughts here?
So I want to talk about the past two races that they mention, and they say, oh, look, these black candidates lost. Here's why. In 2014, when Anthony Brown was running for governor, do you want to know why he lost? I saw some people asking in the chat. Because they ran out of money before the general election. Right. How is that his skin color's fault? That is mismanagement. And then Ben Jealous, when he challenged Hogan, as Hogan was running as the incumbent, when he got the nomination, because he was more progressive than the rest of the candidates in the primary, Democratic officials in the state of Maryland either would not support him or championed Larry Hogan and supported the Republican. So again, when that's what you're working with in your own party, you are doomed to fail.
That's right.
It has nothing to do with their skin color. It is mismanagement and ineptitude in the Maryland Democratic Party. So this is totally bogus. And like you said, they would never ask that. Like when Amy McGrath in Kentucky blew $80 million in a doomed attempt to try to unseat Mitch McConnell, did anyone say, oh, it's because she's white? Of course not.
Right.
That's not why. You have a 2-to-1 majority in Maryland. And if you have Democratic officials cheering on the Republican, that's why these people are losing.
Yeah, we expect better out of our supposed allies. Okay, Trump supporters now believe that Trump, Putin, and Xi Jinping are all somehow trying to save the world from the deep state. Here it is.
You can take a gun, shoot somebody in the face. It's not hard. Sometimes it might even be fun if they're a godless commie.
Now, what they're trying to do is sneak the COVID vaccine in your salads.
I hate math. Somebody say amen.
I got a good idea what's going on in Ukraine. When they went into Ukraine and they found these labs, they believe that maybe that the deep state is possibly going to use a bioweapon on Russian people. Because they've been, just like they were collecting our DNA in China, they've been collecting their DNA as well.
So Trump and Putin right now are the only ones successfully fighting against the deep state.
Well, I think as well as Xi too.
Who?
Xi.
Oh, Xi Jinping? Mm-hmm. So Xi Jinping is fighting against
he's a good guy.
Oh, so he's fighting against it.
Why? Because think about it. He's not part of the CCP.
But Xi Jinping, do you think he's working with Putin and Trump against the deep state?
I think he probably is. Yeah, probably. I've heard that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard
Xi
that.
Jinping is working against the deep state.
Modi also in India. Yeah, I've heard that.
Xi Jinping, Modi, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump are all working against the deep state.
Right, and then you've got the White Hat Alliance, which is a lot of countries, Canada, France.
He is part of the good guys. The reason I think that is because he's fixing to go into Taiwan. You wait and see what I tell you. When he gets into Taiwan, guess what he's gonna find? More labs.
More biolabs.
That is all planned out, y'all. It's all planned. This is one big sting operation. That's what I believe.
Yeah, so Xi Jinping, Putin, and Trump are the only ones fighting against the deep state and making sure that there are no bioweapons to be released.
That's right, because if they do not stop them, they will release them. And next time it'll be far worse than any fake coronavirus.
Wow.
It's all been planned out, y'all. On a serious note, Trump did say he loves the poorly educated. He said that, loves them. They manipulate individuals who have a low independence threshold, the inability to think critically about the reality that's in front of them. They like to spoon feed information and control the methodology and how they receive it. What happens when you are constantly spoon-fed information that's contrary to truth? That right there. The people you just saw were designed by a massive intentional political manipulation to guard them from actual truth. Jordan, I give you the last words on this.
I don't know if I can make sense of what I just saw.
And you shouldn't even try, brother.
It was incoherent. I mean, they've just totally done a 180 on people that they previously, hated. Like Xi Jinping was, almost public enemy number one for the Trump administration, and they really wanted to ratchet up tensions with China. And now all of a sudden, he's our ally. I'm floored.
Yeah.
The bioweapons labs is just like a totally like off the wall conspiracy theory that I think a lot of fringe groups have been pushing. But at the end of the day, all these types of, conspiracies and talking points just cover for the atrocities that are happening daily in Ukraine. And it breaks my heart to see it, as I know it does yours. It's really, really disgusting that this is something that people believe.
Yeah, that ridiculous biolab conspiracy came from Russia, echoed by China, adopted by people like Gabbard and others. So you're gonna see this continue. It has not stopped. If you could, brother, give us how people can follow you, check out your great work. Always a pleasure having you.
Appreciate it, thank you for having me. Videos are on Rebel HQ on YouTube, and Deep Dive airs Tuesdays and Thursdays on twitch.tv/TYT.
Thank you, my friend. All right.
Thanks, Doc.
The bullpen is next. Stick and stay.
I went to Kentucky Fried Chicken when I first got my license, like 17 years old or 17, 18, whatever it was. And I'm driving, I think, my dad's Oldsmobile. And I parked it in a place where there was two cars next to me, really tight spot, and a car behind me. I don't even know how I got in there because I'm a terrible driver. Back then I was an even worse driver. And on the roads I'm okay, but in parking spots, I have terrible spatial reasoning and I'm a mess. And on my way out, I hit all three cars at once. I broke all records, okay? So I went, as I'm backing out, I went boom, oh, and this side hit that car, this side hit this car, and the back hit the third car, okay? And I got stuck. I didn't know how to get out. Like, I went, okay, for this, and then I'm like, no, and then, right? And then finally I had to stop, go inside the KFC and go, I'm sorry, I hit a bunch of your cars. They're like, what do you mean a bunch of your cars? I'm like, I don't know.
Wow, there's a B?
Yeah. I'm like, I hit 3 cars. I don't know. So you guys gotta come help me, okay? Okay, so one, my bad. Really sorry about that. Okay, number 2, can someone take my car out? Because I don't want to keep hitting your cars, and I'm incapable of taking it out of this spot.
Now, baby, move that fat, baby, move that fat. We thugged out.
Hi, I'm Brett Ehrlich with breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. This is breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. Hi, Brett Ehrlich here. According to EPA head Scott Pruitt, climate change is not happening. He cited a meme on Facebook he saw. When pressed to back up this source, he said it must be accurate because the watermark said it was made by a scientist. So, your move, Truth.
Do all of you know the Young Turks?
An outlet like yourself that are willing to cover this story from the very beginning and that weren't afraid to say, hey, this is something that is legitimate.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
Brent Welder is very progressive Democrat. He's a just Democrat. In fact, uncorrupted, not going to take big corporate PAC money. When did you start watching the show and when did you become a member?
So I've been watching for 10 years, an active viewer, but also more importantly, getting out there with causes like Wolfpack.
By the end of our campaign, we had organized about 22,000 individual contributions with an average about $27 a piece. And those initial people were a lot of TYT supporters as well.
In looking at the world in a very different way than corporate media does.
It takes those early people who believe that can really be the seeds of this movement, and that has been the Young Turks.
Thank you, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks.
Thank you to TYT and all the progressives around the country that have our backs.
You know, the first and only interviews that we had tonight to be with the Young Turks as well, because you guys have been here from the very beginning, and that's what this night is all about.
And I thank Cenk very much for the very good work that he does.
Thank you so much for all in this together, and the people are so powerful, and we're gonna get it done.
Thank you for your constant support.
It's a pleasure to be with rebels. I like that.
For all of the help that you've given to the Just Democrats, to Wolfpack, to help fellow progressives, thank you guys, to all the Young Turks members that make it possible.
Hey, this is Edwin. Most of you might recognize me, well, not me, mostly my laugh from the main show.
I mean, it's gonna be hard to get the Uyghur maneuver on him.
And today, my talent is Rubik's Cubes. You gotta forgive me, it's been at least 5 years since I've competed. So that's why I'm actually going pretty slow. Watch this.
All right, welcome back. Always good to be with you. Do not forget, Reactions with Rayvana is next. Make sure you check out Rayvana right after Indisputable. That is a Twitch exclusive. Go to twitch.tv/TYT to catch an all new Reactions with Rayvana. Very insightful commentary. Let me read a couple of comments for the sake of time. I cannot get to them all. Jacqueline says, keep it up. All right, we shall do. Sarkanos, Stanley, no. Why, man, why? Yep. And Surrender to the Flow says, my first shout out from the doc, my life is complete. I complete you, you complete me. That's how this works. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bullpen. In the Bullpen today, we have Mr. Daniel Chang Contreras, commentator Young Voices. We're going to talk about the conflict in Ukraine and how it seems as if media in America is amplifying the voice of Vladimir Putin. And where does this all come from and where's it going? Daniel, thank you for being on the program. How are you?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm doing great and it's an honor to talk with you guys.
Absolutely, honor is mine, sir. I don't want to presume what you know or believe about media in America and them promoting Vladimir Putin. So if you would, give us your sentiment and I will then opine.
Well, I think that the situation with media talking about some specific talking and repeating some specific talking points from the Kremlin is just part, I would say, of the business model on media in general. And it's not only in Russia and Ukraine, it goes far beyond. It just simply, the views that gain the titles, the headlines that gain more views, of course, are the controversial opinions. And that goes in Russia and that goes in practically every single issue that you have in America and in world politics. And that's why you have media amplifying the views of a really small part of the Republican Party or conservative movement. And they're trying to just amplify it because it gets people riled up and it gets people, just subscribing and watching videos and paying a subscription and reading articles. So it's just the business model that has caused these kind of situations.
So to adopt what you're saying into a more fuller conversation, you're saying that people like Tucker Carlson, they are only taking political positions and social positions because that gets them clicks and views. They don't necessarily believe any of this. They're simply doing it to increase their bottom line.
Well, I think there's a difference between I do think Tucker Carlson believes what he's saying. I honestly do think that he believes it. I think he has, and he and Candace Owens and other conservative pundits, they do believe it. But the media outlet in general, like the media atmosphere in general, replicate those because it's good for business, it's good for the interactions, and it's good for the model to keep going on. I do believe Tucker Carlson believes it, and I do believe.
Well, let me ask you this: since you believe that he believes it, tell me, when did he change his mind? Because he was critical of Russian leadership just last year, and he has been critical of Russian leadership for the duration of his journalistic career up until now. Candace Owens, the same. Candace Owens has been allow me to finish, brother, and I will give you time to opine. Candace Owens has also been critical of the Kremlin in on-record commentary, and now she has obviously supported Russia. And even Donald Trump himself at one time was critical of Vladimir Putin. Now it seems as if he is now an apologist for Vladimir Putin, and you see that reflected in other conservative members of Congress. And I want to read a couple of stats to you, because 74% of Americans recently polled by Pew Research believe that Russian President Vladimir Putin is wrong in this conflict as it relates to invasion of Ukraine. Pew Research also identified that 51% of Republicans and 50% of Democrats regard the invasion as a major threat to United States interests. So it seems as if when you quantify all of the data, these individuals that are pro-Putin are actually antithetical to the general sentiment of the average American voter.
Yes, so first with the issue with Tucker Carlson specifically, I would say that if you see him, for example, you see his opinion when a few months before on the issue of Ukraine, he has not necessarily been as critical with the Kremlin as you portray. I do think that Tucker Carlson maybe like 5-10 years ago was more critical, but like for the last 2 or 3 years he has not actually. So he actually, like in an interview in 2019, he actually says in one point, he said like, well, I'm actually kind of on Russia's side in some ways. And I do believe that this happens because there is, I'm a conservative myself, so I can talk. I'm a conservative, by the way, so I know a little bit of the the media ecosystem and the way we conservatives think. There is this perception that everything, the mistrust, the mainstream media and mainstream and legacy media outlets is so big that everything that they support, it creates like a reaction on some conservatives to oppose it immediately, right?
But so wait a minute, so let's talk about that, because my show, Indisputable, we're not considered a mainstream show. We do mainstream numbers, but we're not considered a mainstream show because we're willing to tell the truth and we don't give a damn who gets offended by it, all right? That means that we cannot and will not ever subscribe to corporate interests, to political ideology or personality. None of that would influence my commentary nor my context. So that makes me well outside of the mainstream. But let me bring something to your attention, because I do find it ironic, and much of what you're saying is true about the business model of media, right? But don't you find it ironic that many of these individuals are proclaiming to be super patriots? I mean, they are literally holding an identity brand saying that they are American first or America first and democracy first, while at the same time presenting a point of view that's adversarial to an American first point of view. Let's be clear about Russia. Russia did interfere with American democracy. Russia did provide weapons and engage in some low-level combat against American soldiers during our engagement with Vietnam. Russia has been an agitator against the United States of America. Now, all of a sudden, Russia is an ally to some of these individuals who proclaimed an American first agenda?
I'll go further than that, and I'll add to the criticism in some regards that a lot of people in the conservative, and again, this is not the majority, and I understand that it's easy to see them as the majority, but not really. I mean, the majority of conservative voters do not like Vladimir Putin, and as you said, majority of Republicans and Democrats.
Right, but remember, the number is massively, wait a minute, but the number is massively different when you look at the Republican Party. So Republicans are now split when it comes to the discussion of Russia and Ukraine, while where Democrats and independents are basically at 70 to 80% saying that's a bad move by Russia and we do not support Russia. You don't have that same sentiment in the Republican Party, and I have to submit to you that part of this reasoning of Republicans is attributed to what Donald Trump told them to believe about Putin.
I will go and say that's most just, again, it's just this contrarian brand and sentiment in the Republican Party. It's really a lot of people talk and they just want to say no to whatever the Democratic Party or and of course, you're not mainstream media, but the mainstream media has, of course, been critical of Vladimir Putin.
So are you saying that people like Candace Owens are just being contrarian? Or do they actually believe what they're saying?
They do that. They do both, actually. So that's what I'm going to say, that they do both. So they believe it, but the entire belief system sometimes it really does look like whatever CNN says, I'll go the opposite. That actually looks like a really consistent path to understand why they think like that. And I'll go.
But if they think like that, brother,
criticism,
but think about this. If they think like that, if they're saying we're just going to say the opposite of what CNN says or mainstream media, that means you're not looking at truth objectively. You're only looking at a reaction or reactionary point of view rather than looking at what point of view is actually right. Listen, man, a broke clock is right twice a day. Okay, just because somebody that you don't necessarily like is saying something doesn't mean that you automatically are adversarial to that message. You look at truth for what it is. Truth stands for itself. Why take a point of view that's adversarial to truth?
Again, here's the thing. I would probably agree with you in the sense that that is not the best approach to debate policy and debate specifically the situation in Ukraine and Russia. But I was going to go in this and say that I'll add to the criticism and say if you're a patriot, you're not only patriot of the United States, you support patriot causes around the world and support pride of country, which I do, by the way. I do support pride of country, and you see the Ukrainian people are showcasing the biggest pride of country you can showcase in history. Actually, the country is being invaded by a foreign power trying to conquer the country, and they are fighting back, and Zelensky is fighting back, and that is actually the most patriot thing you can do in that specific context. And somehow, some people say, well, no, he's a globalist, which is completely nonsense. Globalists don't stay in Kyiv while Russian bombs are flying all around.
Mr. Contreras, let me ask you this. We're running out of time. The next show is coming up. You are a conservative.
Yeah.
I want to ask you personally, does it bother you that your party seems schizophrenic, that the conservative movement seems schizophrenic as it relates to the idea that sovereign democracies, independent democracies should not be invaded when it comes to the idea of Vladimir Putin and if he gives a damn about American interests, if he's an enemy or a friend? Does it bother you to see the sudden change in ideology as it relates to the Kremlin?
It does bother me, and it bothers me because the reason for it and the center for it, I'm not going to personalize it Donald Trump or not. I'm critical of Donald Trump, but I'm not going to personalize it on him specifically. I'm going to say the sentiment is that they consider, and this also goes with Democrats in many issues, the domestic adversaries are far more dangerous than foreign actual hostile nations like Russia or China. And that is what is actually concerning me, because we're entering a decade that will be very dangerous for the United States and for the world in general.
Let me tell you why I disagree.
Be united against not only Russia, but also China eventually.
Let me tell you why I disagree with that on at least some level. I do believe domestic terrorism is a problem. You would agree that what happened at the Capitol was domestic terrorism, January 6th.
I would say that the January 6th was, of course, an appalling situation, an appalling attack on democracy, of course, an appalling attack on the Capitol. I don't necessarily want to say domestic terrorism itself, because again, it's some legal implications with that. I'm not a lawyer, and of course, I condemn January 6th. But again, I'm gonna go further with this. A lot of Democrats tend to, of course, cast every single Trump voter as a January 6th.
All right, well, listen, and
that's another debate.
Some Democrats may do that. I don't. The people that attacked the Capitol, that decided to attack officers, that decided to commit to criminal trespass, destruction of property, trying to gain access into secure locations, they were criminals, and they were trying to stop a politically mandated process, a constitutionally mandated process known as certifying the presidential election. That is textbook definition of terrorism. The dynamic that I want to bring to your attention is this: while domestic issues are dangerous as well, when we start talking about let's give a pass to Vladimir Putin, because this is what Tucker said in his commentary. Let's give a pass to Vladimir Putin because Putin never called me a racist. Does that make sense to you?
Of course, it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
I mean, that's a whole thing. It really doesn't make sense. It's just that, again, it's it's not the entire Conservative Party is not entire. In fact, the vast majority of the Republican Party has voted for sanctions and whatnot, and support military assistance, although no fights.
Right, but once again,
so
and you're right.
just
but once
making that clear, because we really do need to make that clear, because I understand the desire and the need to showcase these kind of things.
Yeah.
But people will start saying, "Oh, we did."
Daniel, listen to me, brother. You're right. The majority of Republicans are still saying democracy matters. We need to provide aid in this international conflict, but it's changing. The mindset is changing, and we've seen this happen with other dynamics in the Republican Party. If Trump keeps messaging it, if Tucker Carlson keeps saying it, Candace Owens keeps saying it, guess what ends up happening 1 year later? You all in the Conservative Party, the majority of you think completely different 1 year later than you thought 1 year before. We have seen this happen before, brother. Listen, I encourage you to continue to tell the truth as you are telling the truth. I appreciate you being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always great to have debates with people who don't think like me.
I like you just fine, and I appreciate you coming on the program. Okay, all right, remember, take care of yourself, take care of each other, take care of the planet. Remember, the truth is always indisputable.